Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In this video, I wish to discuss the structure of science as it is, internally, and the possible future thereof, briefly at least, and its impact on society and, the possible future thereof. Let's talk about the structure of science as it is firstly. So one thing we can notice easily is that science is subdivided into various areas related to their area of study, let's say, like the subject of research, right? Or object of research, actually. So why is that the case? Well, it's because initially science started as you can bring up various hypotheses on this, but initially it's just like a curiosity about the world around us, right? It's just like I'm studying the world, etc. So I'm a scientist, right? But as the amount of knowledge grew and the complexity of knowledge grew as well, increased, we've had to find a way to fight this complexity and this increase, numerical increase in knowledge. And one way in fighting this increase and in diversity and in amount of knowledge is to divide the labor, right? Division of labor. It's okay, I'm not just scientist anymore, I'm a physicist, or I'm a chemist, or I'm a geographer, or I'm a mathematician, or I'm a chemist. I've already mentioned chemist, did I? I don't know. Or I'm a, ecologist, or, well, you name it, linguist, or theologist, or blah, blah, blah. So, this is a sign of division of labor, which is a tool of combating complexity, right? It's okay, now it takes 100 years to train a scientist who would know everything, so maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should subdivide all the sciences, all of science, all of knowledge, into smaller branches so that we can spend maybe 5 to 10 years to train them, the people, involved, so that it would be manageable, right? So this is where it comes from. And I'm actually kind of curious, so this is more of an invitation to a discussion rather than a point, is that, if we equate science to knowledge, is it the same in other areas where any kind of knowledge is possible, which is basically any area, whatever humans do, in arts, in sports, in cooking or whatever. I don't know, actually. And again, it's a question that I have, but yeah. But in science, it's definitely the case. As the amount of stuff, I guess, yeah, in cooking, we also have specialization. We need a cook who can make sushi, and a cook who can make pizza, and a cook who can make steaks, or something like that, all these stations in different restaurants, Gordon Ramsay, kind of stuff, yeah. Hell's Kitchen and stuff, yeah. But yeah, whatever. So, but it was an old school type of division, right? Based on the area of research. We have a chemist, we have a physicist, we have a mathematician, we have a geographer, we have blah, blah, blah. But new challenges, I feel like they demand some new solutions, I would say, alternative approach, and by new challenges, what do I mean? Well, giga, omega, uber specialization. This division of labor has come way too far, so that even physics is divided in so many branches today that one physicist is barely able to understand another, oh, I'm sorry, I'm studying microwave wave transmission in semiconductors. don't quote me on that, I just made it up like out of the blue. And the other says, oh, I'm sorry, I can't understand you as well because I'm studying aerosol behavior in the atmosphere, although it's like atmospheric physics or whatever. So it's like these guys live in completely different universes, if you know what I mean, in scientific terms. So yeah, it's a big challenge now. How do we like even bring them together? You know, like even physics is now super fractured. It's not a whole thing anymore, right? So like the whole science itself has branched so far and so much that it's not even reconcilable with itself even, right? One person doesn't know what other people do, etc. And it brings, obviously, certain dangers. And I could elucidate on that on some general terms and bloody blah blah, but I don't want to because I don't want this video to be too long. But let's just say that like if one cell of your body, let me bring this simple analogy, if one cell of your body doesn't know what other cells of your body do, you're kind of doomed, you know, you're kind of dead already, you just don't know it, you know, in Hollywood terms, maybe. So yeah, so these challenges, like this over specialization in particular, and some others like peer review, and like the way science is organized in general, like this hierarchical way, when we have like the hierarchs, like the Pope of science, which is pretty much the Nobel Prize Committee, let's face it, and major institutions of science, being on top of everything, and then everything like as a pyramid goes down to like the plebs, like the slaves, the PhD students who do all the work, right? But all the credit goes to the, I mean, I've been one of them, right? So I can speak out here, and all the credit goes to the Nobel Prize Committee. Eventually it all like, you know, like funnels to the top. But anyway, so there are these kinds of challenges at the very least. And what I'm saying is that probably some alternative approaches are needed because this doesn't look sustainable. This doesn't look cool. Like if we keep going, it's just gonna like avalanche into a complete catastrophe, right? Like again, another stupid analogy, like imagine like a bunch of like scientists sitting on a active volcano which is about to erupt like right now, and they're all like studying like microscopic structure of the soil of this volcano, like each one of them, right? So this is the kind of the societal structure of science we have today. Like each one is focused on their very own small area, whereas like the whole structure is about to explode or something like that. But this is my vision anyways. So one alternative way, which is like the probably the most radical way of reorganizing the way science is conducted or organized, again, reorganizing the way science is organized is a tautology, kind of, which is a staple of this channel, so I wanted to specifically note that. So it is based on the network pathway. You know, I've already mentioned that science is currently operating on a hierarchical type of pathway. And again, this is another like running theme on this channel, like networks versus hierarchies, like pyramids versus like root systems, or like these mushroom, I don't know the word, like rhizoma is the postmodernistic term, but I don't know how is it called. I mean, rhizoma is technically actually roots. It's not the mycosa, maybe. I don't know. I'm sorry, don't quote me on that. I haven't prepared the proper term in English. But anyway, So it's this horizontal organization of networks, like nodes and connections between them, rather than a pyramid where something is on the top and everything is at the bottom, etc., etc. So this alternative way is actually what I'm kind of trying to organize with my own work, which I'm not gonna make public because it would kind of demotivate me to do that, to continue to do that. You know, like when you express something, it kind of again demotivates you because you think, okay, now that I've expressed it, maybe somebody else would do it, but I don't want to. But there's actually one guy who, at least one guy, maybe there are others who I'm not aware of, who was working on the very similar thing, almost the same actually, and we talked to him by email, but then he said to me that, oh, okay, this latest events of 2020, and I'm not gonna name them, but you know what I mean, have led me to believe, means him, that it's actually not viable. But I think he's wrong, actually. It's still very viable. It's actually even more so viable after 2020. But again, we'll talk about this later in this video in particular. So yeah, but this new way that I would have proposed, like this new radical way of, I'll just describe it to you as, again, substituting, actually, I don't know the proper word, so like substituting for or with, I don't know which one is which, like substituting this for this or this with this, like I don't know how this works in English, so I'm just I'll just say like exchanging hierarchies for networks. That's how I'm gonna frame it, okay? So this pathway would lead to big problems in both science itself and society as a whole, and will like in its society's power structures, obviously. But again, I'll put an asterisk here and we'll return to this question, to this issue rather, some maybe 20 minutes later. Okay. That was like first part of the technical part of science, of sociology of science rather, and how it operates. The second part is what I would say, there are possibilities for some milder solutions, you know, to like, again, I'm not sure if there's such a term exists in English. It's like palliative, which means like in Latin, like semi-solution, like it comes from medicine. It basically means that you're treating the symptoms rather than the disease itself, right? So it's like a halfway solution. So, but I still think it's kind of viable, and I actually think it's gonna appear, or it maybe already appeared, but I'm just not aware of it, in science in particular. So there are at least two of these milder ways, palliative ways of solving the current scientific problems. So one of them is like separating scientists not by area of research, which again leads to like complete fracturing of science, but by their skill set. Like literally just by their skill set. Like one guy can do this, another girl can do this, another Z attack helicopter can do this, etc., etc. So it leads to an approach that I would call sort of like startup science. When, okay, like somebody comes up with an idea, like what if we studied this? Like a connection between, I don't know, the number of strings in a guitar and the amount of hair on a cat that lives in a home where this guitar is being played on. I mean, out of the blue kind of idea. And they say, okay, for this project, for this scientific research, for this scientific startup, we need a guy who can count the numbers of hair of a cat, which is a skill. We need a guy who can count the numbers of guitar strings, which is also a skill. We need a guy who can like make correlations, which is also a skill. We need a guy who can actually write a effing text of a paper, which is a skill, etc. Well, you know what I mean. Like, we just subdivide our like general scope into like smaller tasks and divided by skills, not by area of research. Like, there's no science devoted for counting of cat's hair, you know. Like, maybe we need some machine learning, some like photo whatever skills, and then we maybe subdivide this by smaller skills, whatnot. I mean, whatever. So that's one approach, like milder approach. Another milder approach would be to and actually, like, sorry, I'm returning to this startup science kind of thing. It's just like from my personal experience, like, I've been around, you know, all these alternative science communities, like specifically Electric Universe community, and it's actually very frequent there, like this kind of approach, because there's very limited amount of people with actual skills, like who can actually do something. It's mostly like people who are interested, and I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just stating it as a fact, right? So anyone who has some skill is usually very valuable, and they're usually being drawn into certain sub-projects inside of this community, right? So it works really as this startup science kind of thing. So they say, okay, we need a chemist to comment on this, and they're looking for a chemist. You know, and they find them and they say, okay, what do you think about this hypothesis or whatever? It's really cool in a way, because it makes it very personal, actually. Like, I've participated in many discussions of this sort, like when, I mean, these guys are all very bright bright is not the correct word in English, probably, like, very like noticeable, you know. It's kind of cool, actually. Yeah. So that was one way of mitigating the scientific problems in a palliative, milder kind of way. But another way of mitigating them mildly would be to separate scientists not by area of research, not by skill, but even more general, by personal traits. So that's another possibility. So maybe we say, okay, you take ocean test, you know, this openness, conscientiousness, agreeableness. E, extroversion, A is agreeableness, and N is neuroticism. And plus maybe we add an IQ test, plus maybe we add a couple of other tests, and we have like a rough picture of a personality, and we say, okay, this is the guy we need here. We need like a very conscientious guy to gather the data, so that he would like sit in the lab the whole day and the whole night, possibly like 24/7. We need a very neurotic guy to overlook everything that's going on, because neurotic people, when they notice a mistake, they're like, we're all gonna die, and they're gonna say, this is a very important mistake. And we need like a very well, you get the idea, you know, like try to build a collective based on that, right? It still kind of draws from this startup science kind of approach, but it's still kind of viable. Like, maybe it's like an addition to the area of research type of approach, right? So you say, okay, not only we need a biologist, we need a what are the other traits? Open biologist. So they would be open to new ideas, like I don't know, like spiders have a connection to the world's soul by Hegel or whatever shit like that. If our hypothesis is about that, but whatever. So these are two alternative, or like 1.5 alternative approaches of milder sort than just substituting pyramids with networks, which is a very radical approach. Okay, so we talked about like the technical side of things and like science proper side of things. Now let's talk about the society side of things. So one thing is like, I'll start from general points. So I would firstly note that science was based on religion. And I think in my video, Science and Anarchy, I've noted this. Actually, it was about the analogy between science and Christianity, but science comes from religion in the first place. And again, like, as I've many times quoted, like Francis Bacon said that the universe was written in a language of mathematics by God, but, and this is end of quote, what if you remove God, then how can we describe the universe in mathematics? Well, it's kind of a miracle, but the God is not there anymore, so what kind of miracle is this, right? So, yeah. Of course, I mean, I have my own opinion about this, which I've expressed sometime before, but probably many times, but I can't quote you any videos in particular. Anyways, like Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro make this point, and it's probably not their point, but they express it at the very least, is that the Enlightenment, not only like science comes from religion, but also enlightenment as like a quasi-society oriented philosophy comes from religious thinking as well, right? It's impossible without Christianity in particular. So, and the following, this is, I'm not sure if Peterson and Shapiro agree on this, but I don't care, to be honest. These are my thoughts now, that the following from the Enlightenment type of sort of trajectory was just people trying to rationalize whatever they've already had as moral beacons, so to speak, with, again, some, well, tautology, rational arguments, rationalize with rational arguments, right? Yeah, in one of my previous videos, I've talked about this, like it's just a sugar coating, like rationality is just a I think it was glass cannon. Could be wrong though, again. I have all this crazy merry-go-round with 2 unreleased videos at this moment, and so it's kind of sketchy for me to orient in. Okay, so yeah. And look at the, for example, U.S. Declaration of Independence, which says that human rights are or were endowed by the Creator, right? Well, what if you remove the Creator? Same question remains. What happens to the rights? So that was like, what happens if we remove religion from society, right? Do you still have science? That's a big question. Do you still have like society, like human rights and stuff? Those are big questions, right? And another big question is, okay, if we assume that science is like self-contained, it doesn't even have any connection to religion, still there's a third big question, is can you base your society on science only, right? And that's a big question. It's so big that it's kind of trumps any possible answer, any possible positive answer, I should say. Like, the only answer is no, you can't base your society on science, like, ever, because science is not a worldview. What is a worldview? Well, okay, I wouldn't describe what is a worldview because it would be kind of stupid and lengthy. What I would say is, like, what is the difference between a science and a worldview? Like a worldview can be religious, artistic, maybe some other sorts. So what is the difference of science and all these other things which are worldviews, or at least could be worldviews? So the difference is that science has no ethical component. Science is, as I've many times told you, and it's not my idea again, I've probably took it, I actually legit took it from somewhere else, and I can't even tell you where, but you wouldn't know what it is, the place where I took it from, so never mind. So it's not my idea, but it's a good idea, I believe, is that the difference between science and a worldview is that science doesn't have an ethical component, again, or imperative, you might say. So it's, again, this David Hume's guillotine, right? So Hume said that you cannot derive an ought from is, right? You cannot derive you must type of statement from there is type of statement. It's just impossible. Like these exist in parallel universes, roughly speaking, right? So science is all about if then type of statements. Like if we load a 100-pound charge into a cannon and fire it up and it explodes, then this would happen. This is science, okay? Statements like you should not steal from your neighbor are not scientific statements, because it's not if then. It's not like if you steal from your neighbor, then, well, science has no say in it, because it's too unclear what would happen then. Because, again, I mean, you can try to navigate society with the help of science. Like, let's say, okay, if I do this, then what possibly can happen? But it's already kind of not science. It's like everyday knowledge. Like, if they find out I did this, if they have a camera installed, if they have a dog, if somebody accidentally comes back home from work earlier than usual, if I get stuck somewhere, like, you know, it's not science, basically. That's what I'm saying. Like, you should not steal. It's not a scientific statement. Scientific statement is that if the door weighs, well, I mean, you get the idea, hopefully. So, yeah. So society can't be built on science because it doesn't tell you how you should live, right? Science, that is, doesn't tell you. And the illusion that it does comes from remnant pieces of religion that are still lingering in our society. And I say this again without any moral judgment, I just state it as fact. Or again, remnant like moral practices and traditions. Like again, in one of my previous videos, like very recent ones, I've talked about tradition being like an societal analog of a habit. And I have no idea which video that was. Like I'm so dizzied by my own schedule right now. So yeah. So long story short, you can't base your society on science because science doesn't give you any values, right? It doesn't give you an ethics. And society needs ethics to survive, basically. Because, well, people need some orients, like some beacons to follow. Otherwise, like if you don't know what other person follows, you cannot, like, work with them. They become too unreliable for you to possibly negotiate with, right? In any sort of way. Like if you think that the other person can kill you at any moment because, well, they have no incentive not to, no, like, more morality that permits killing, then, well, how are you going to treat them? You'll be, like, very cautious, like extremely cautious. And like any normal life would be disrupted by that, right? Okay, so hopefully this is understood. And another aspect of that is like the very modern day, like the last 2 years, is when CRNVRS, not carnivores, by the way, again, hashtag abject power, has punched a big hole in the trust the science kind of narrative. And well, let's discuss the very topic, like trust the science, right? Like trust, really? Like, is that a scientific approach? I should trust that it works? I mean, it was supposed to be like proven already. And firstly, like, so it's solid, rock solid facts, you know. That's first point. And the second point is that isn't science initially supposed to be like critical? So if you mistrust the paper, let's say, you can like put your own criticism up. You can say, okay, these authors are wrong because there are these counter arguments. So what do you say about that? But instead, you're being told, trust it, right? This paper is true. Just trust it. I mean, if you don't trust it, you're an immoral person, right? That's an interesting turn of events, right? When science is treated as an authority, as a moral authority, beyond doubt, and it doesn't look like science anymore, at least, well, as it's supposed to be, right? So, yeah. So it's kind of a long-winded attempt at saying that, you know what, actually science is a worldview. But I think in reality what it is that there's other interests who are camouflaging as science, right? And they're just putting science as a meat shield in front of them, kind of like, you know, climatologists, so-called, put like children in front of them, like this Greta girl, and her like minions from Swedish schools, maybe some other schools, I don't know, like using children as a tool in politics. That's a really cool move, guys. Like, I'm proud of you. So yeah, yeah, so trust in science, that's really cool. But one cool thing which actually followed from this is that they've actually made it explicit that science is now like an analog of religion. Like, it's again substituted, I don't know, with or for, whatever. So we had religion and now we have science. I'm not gonna use the word substitute, right? So science is like the moral authority now. It's now the thing which kind of justifies whatever you do. Hence, if you want to do something, you address science and you speak in the name of science. Like whatever you want to do, you say, okay, scientists say this, like 97%, you know, which is again garbage, because, well, okay. We can talk about this if you wish, but I won't do that here. So, yeah. So, you're just supposed to submit, basically, right? Trust the science. Just like Trudeau's government, like in the last couple of days. I'm recording this on February 23rd, by the way. Just FYI. For those of you who are watching this on YouTube, 2 weeks later. So Trudeau's government has shown that our belief that the Western society is liberal is actually not true, right? Trudeau, right? So, and by liberal I mean like legit liberal in the classical sense of the word, like belief in freedom, right? Not liberal in American sense, which basically means socialistic, which is anti-liberal actually. So science says, trust the science is a slogan for like, you're supposed to be critical, but you actually shouldn't, right? Just trust it. And Trudeau's liberalism, actually like Western liberalism, says that you are actually free, but you're actually not, you know, so shut up and submit. And these are two like projections of the same thing, right? Science and society, they kind of act parallel to each other. And Trudeau's actions are also justified by science, obviously, because he can't turn to religion, because religion is kind of obsolete today. Today, the thing is the science, right? So trust the science. Okay, so let's conclude this round. It's actually going to be a long-winded conclusion, but firstly, let's repeat what we've had previously, what we talked about in the last like half an hour plus, probably. Is that I've talked about how separation by area of research in science is kind of obsolete because it leads to uber specialization, and it's unhealthy. And these new challenges require an alternative approach, one radical of which could be like substituting, okay, I'm not going to use this word, exchanging hierarchical science into network-oriented science. And I have very practical ideas of this sort, but I need some actual resources, like, again, manpower firstly, and probably money, I don't know, to pay for this manpower to organize all of this, but I have my own ideas how to do that, and maybe I'll be the one who does that. I actually doubt it, but anyway. I've already mentioned there's at least one other guy who came up with the same ideas. Okay, never mind. So, but there's certain milder alternatives to that, like using the startup science approach, where we separate scientists by skill set, kind of like what they do in programming, you know, software development. What are your skills? I'm a PHP, whatever. I can UX, UI, or whatever it's called. I know JavaScript. I'm a front end, whatever developer. You know, like Oracle, whatever, Java. So you have these skills, then you can apply for this scientific startup, like counting cat's hair, right? Or you can't because you don't, etc. And another milder alternative is separating scientists, actually, like a more broader approach would be separating scientists by personal traits. Like, okay, you take the ocean test, IQ test, and maybe a few custom tests to see if you're fit for the job. And then we'll see if you are. This was the first half of the video so far anyway. And the other half was when we talked about science and its impact, the impact of science on society, where we talked about how science comes from religion, ultimately surpassing it as its, what's the antithesis of predecessor, like surpasser? I don't know, like the next thing, you know, the next trend. Yeah, and we talked about how you cannot base your society on science, because science is not a worldview, it lacks an ethical component. And we talked about like modern examples of like, you know, trust the science and Trudeau's administration, which expose, actually, which is a good thing, all these things. Like right now it cannot be hidden anymore. Like, it's so obvious for anyone with like a single brain cell that, yeah. Okay, so these were the conclusions, but now we're coming to a more interesting part, which is the PS, which is not something I often do on this channel. And by the way, since we're not there yet, and again, subscribe to me on Patreon if you wish to support me. There are some short exclusive videos plus some photos, actually. Maybe some more photos would follow, and maybe some videos and maybe some texts even. I don't know. It's kind of chaotic, but there's at least 3 videos at the moment. Again, February 23rd. I don't know how many there will be a week later. But these are short, like 5 to 10 minutes long. What else is there? And one-time donations through PayPal are also possible. So big thanks to everyone who've participated in that already. So let's move to the PS postscriptum type of analysis. So since network-oriented knowledge would remove the current bastion of hierarchy, which is science, again, see above, and remnant religion, again, by the way, see my video, Remnant Religiousness, I would link it in the description. I would link every video I've mentioned here in the description, if I wouldn't forget at least. Hopefully I wouldn't. Since we remove the current bastion of hierarchy, it would mean that it would mean basically another step towards nihilism, which is the path we're still taking. We as like a Western civilization, roughly speaking, but actually the whole world, because the world still follows the Western civilization, all the world literally. And I wish to mention here again this book by Nietzsche with an asterisk called Will to Power, because, well, you've heard these three words many times on this channel, and it's justified because okay, let me give you a couple of factual things firstly about this book. So firstly, this book doesn't exist, strictly speaking, which is already interesting. It was compiled from Nietzsche's late works, like, you know, he always wrote in these short, like, a paragraph maximum, right? And he compiled his books from these short notes, right? So all of his books pretty much are just a compilation of these short notes. And he actually said that it's the hardest part of my work on the book is to compile them in anything like that would make sense as an entity, as a single entity, right? Because it's so diverse and like mosaic internally. Because again, it's not a single text, it's just a bunch of notes, basically. Aphorisms, specifically. And so this book was compiled after his death by his sister, who was also connected to one guy with a mustache, if you know what I mean, from Austria, but then working in Germany as the head of the state. And also his, like a friend, Peter Gast, Nietzsche's friend, I mean. But then in the 1960s, so the book was compiled in early 20th century, like 1905 or something like that. Nietzsche died in 1900, so yeah. But then Italian philologists Colli and Montinari have actually, in the 60s, late 60s, I believe, they've compiled actually the chronological order of Nietzsche's notes, and they've sort of kind of proposed their own version of this book, even though they didn't call it like that. But I mean, if you just take all of these notes and combine them, then you can come up with something similar to Will to Power book, right? But Will to Power was actually like, they've like removed certain fragments, they've like deliberately like rearranged some stuff, because again, Nietzsche's sister was actually not a very good person, and like he actually detested her, etc., etc. So again, I would assume he wouldn't have liked her friendship with the guy with the mustache, you know. So yeah, anyway, yeah, what was I even talking about? Okay, these are certain facts about this book, okay? But there are certain publications which are much more complete than what they've published in early 20th century nowadays. At least there is one such publication in Russian, which I have read back in my day, so to speak, like 15 years ago. And like, again, from my personal experience, I can tell you that this is probably the most powerful book ever, like ever, you know, at least in the last like 400 years, this is the most powerful book. Like, it's like, if you read it, like, your whole world will crumble, and I mean it. And like, it's very like it's reading it is kind of like committing suicide. And again, I mean it. It's actually more harm than committing suicide. So again, if you wish to read it, then I mean, more power to you, but you've been warned. Okay, like it completely destroyed me. That's what I can say. Like at this moment, I'm still a ruin of a person rather than a person. That's what I can tell. So all the things I talk about are actually heavily influenced by this book in particular, because it leaves such a trace that you cannot erase anymore, like ever. Like yeah. Okay. That's one thing. Another thing is that, okay, so we had like religion being substituted science. And then we have, as I claim, the next step, which is no science, right? We had the authority of religion, we had the authority of science, we still do. But we're kind of coming to the end, I would say. Like, trust the science is kind of already like, already kind of iffy, you know. So, no science is the next stage. But what it is then, like, you cannot build your next step on denial, right? So, but I don't know what it is. Like, again, I've proposed a few alternatives, but they don't have a name yet, at least, right? And by the way, my previous videos was about the names, and maybe it's good that it doesn't have a name yet. So maybe it's actually good. Like, again, some thinkers today, specifically in the Russian-speaking world, talk about the great anarchistic revolution that is gonna come. When the national states would be demolished, basically. And to a degree, I've also mentioned that, following them. And I would say that maybe it would again be paralleled in scientific world and societal world at the same time. So in scientific world, the great anarchistic revolution could mean, for example, again, the demolition of a hierarchy and like entrance into the world of scientific networks. That would be very anarchistic, I would claim, like without any sarcasm. And in societal world, the demolition of societal hierarchy would mean like the transition from the like central governments to the free market. It's also a network-oriented thing. So that would kind of be a perfect tandem, if you ask me. But that's my kind of values. And I don't know what's gonna happen. Like, I've already talked about like possibility of civilization states coming next after the national states. So maybe civilization states, as they actually expand beyond national states in the first place, maybe they would allow more freedom inside of them, right? So maybe something like that would become possible. But then they would establish even more control on the next stage, like in a couple of decades after they have been established, or in a decade. I don't know, like the world changes so quickly, so one doesn't really know what's going to happen. Yeah. So we'll just keep observing. So until I'm alive and until this channel is up, we'll keep observing. Hopefully we'll have some interesting insights into all of this as it proceeds. And by the way, as long as the internet is still up, because it's not guaranteed, as you can see. The third thing I wanted to note in my PS, which is like overinflated at this point, is like more than half of the length of the whole video, but I mean, what are you gonna do? It's an important topic, I believe. So I think that scientists, as in scientism, i.e. like believers in science, you know, followers of the Church of Science, would be regarded in like 100 years from, like trust the science kind of people, right? Would be regarded in like a century from now, as in the same way as deeply religious people are being regarded today, right? So today we are science power, and religion is like, oh, okay, whatever. So in 100 years from now, it would be the same. Oh, no science power, and science is, oh, okay, something like that. So as followers of an old tradition with like questionable track record, like you might say, and I would actually agree, like mostly positive, both in terms of religion and science. I would say their track record is mostly positive, even though with some troubles, like even large troubles. But then again, the scale of the phenomenon is so huge that you can't evade a lot of big problems, right? But it transformed the whole of society so much, and to more of a good than bad, I would say, that it's undeniable. Okay, and so the sentiment towards scientists, again, as followers of scientism, would be more of a respect on personal level, kind of like you respect your super giga believer neighbor. I mean, you probably would agree that a super giga religious neighbor is better than a complete like anarchist punk neighbor, right? I think we all would agree. Like, so it would be the same with scientists, as in followers of scientism. Like it would be like this sort of personal neighbor type of respect, like a friend maybe type of respect, because again, one of the things is that conviction is actually valued. Again, it's a Christian value, right? If you're constant in what you're doing, like you're not deceiving, you are being true, being yourself. It's actually a Christian kind of thing, right? Be yourself. But again, it's a separate issue. Okay, let's just wrap it up. So it would be a respect on personal level, but a larger disregard in society, right? Society would say, those stupid believers. And there would be like as today we have Dawkins and whatever. Who are the other guys? What are their names? Well, you know these guys. Dawkins, etc. Let's call it that. Who would say, religion is such a bullshit, etc. And in 100 years from now, you would have I don't know, I don't even know what media would it be transferred through, like holographic kind of stuff, like, science is such a bullshit. Yeah, today we have no science type of thing, right? No Dawkins would say something like that. But yeah. But personally, people would still respect scientists. Oh, it's a Jedi. It's an old order, old religion kind of guy. Old republic, sort of. Okay. So let's just wrap it all up. So, as I've said, religion, science, no science. So Nietzsche said, God is dead, and Eugene the philosopher says, science is dead. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.